Welcome! We're back with what will be a new monthly segment of What's in Your Oven. So what we thought we'd start with is something that is just quintessentially English, I would say. And we're going to be making some cherry scones, and I'm going to show you how I make my cup of tea. And I'm not saying this is the definitive, but for me this is perfect cup of tea. So let's get started, and first of all I will show you how to make a lovely scones. So this is what we're going to need to make our lovely cherry scones. Okay, I'll whiz around the ingredients first. So we've got 12 ounces. Now I'll say it in ounces and grams. I'm old-fashioned, so I tend to weigh things in ounces. But we've got 12 ounces of self-raising flour, which is 340 grams. We've got 3 ounces of butter. This is cold butter. It's from the fridge, but I've left it out sort of 10 minutes just so that it's not absolutely rock solid. And when I say butter, I mean real butter, not margarine or any sort of butter substitute. You want real, lovely quality butter. We've then got some caster sugar, and we've got three tablespoons, which is about 50 grams of caster sugar. Now, I think caster sugar is called something different in America, but it's the really fine sugar. It's not the normal granulated, it's a finer ground than that. So, caster sugar. And then we've got some cherries. Now, I've got 75 grams of cherries, and I'll talk about the cherries in a minute because there are different types that you can get. These are glacé cherries, but they're a particular type, so I'll talk about those in a second. And then we're going to need 6 fluid ounces of milk, which is about 160 mils, and that should be warm, not hot or anything like that, just blood temperature, I think is what they say, don't they? So warm milk. You're going to need a little squeeze of lemon, so just an end of a lemon or whatever, you just need a little squeeze. And then a cutter, whatever size cutter you like, whether you like teeny tiny scones. I'm going to do sort of medium sized ones, or great big ones. And a rolling pin. You don't really need the rolling pin, but some people like rolling them out. Okay, so we put our flour into a nice big bowl, and then we take our butter, and I would normally chop this into sort of smaller pieces, but we'll go with it. I'll just break it up with my hands. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to rub the butter into the flour. So as lightly as you can, I'm just going to break up this butter a little bit. So you can see it's soft, but it's not, falling apart soft. It still feels cold in my hand. So I'll just break all those into bits, and then we're just going to rub it in until all the butter's rubbed in and your mixture kind of looks breadcrumby-ish. Okay, so we've rubbed in our butter till we've got this kind of nice, fine, sort of breadcrumby texture. You don't want any lumps of butter, in there. You want it all rubbed in nicely to your flour, okay? And then all we do, it's so simple, this recipe. All we do now is we pop in that bit of sugar that we had and just give that a little distribute around. Okay. Now, if you're making plain scones, it's at this point now where you put in your milk and bring it all together. But we're going to make cherry scones this time. So I've got, like I said before, I've got about 75 grams of cherries here, glacé cherries, and I've just cut them in half. I like to have sort of quite big pieces of cherry in my scone, but if you prefer little fine pieces, just chop it finer. Now, what I've got to say about the cherries is, I'll just pop those down and just show you. There's a couple of different types of glacé cherries you can get, and I've got them here. Sorry about my floury hands. This is the one that I've used, and this is at Billington's. I got these from Sainsbury's if you're in the UK. Now these ones are a natural colour. Let me show you what I mean. I'll take the lid off the other ones. Oh, which I haven't opened yet, so I need to just open those. If you look at the difference in colour with these two, hopefully you can see this one here is much darker. It's a more natural cherry, whereas this one here, it's the more typical glacé cherry that you will see generally in the supermarkets. But if you can find these darker ones, then these ones have got much more flavour. These I find they're okay, but they just taste very sweet to me. They don't really taste very much of cherries, whereas these ones do have a cherry flavour. Now what I did to the cherries was, after I chopped them in half, I've washed them and I've dried them. It's really important that you do this because they come preserved, if you can see that. They come preserved in like a syrup. So the reason we wash them is, one, because I think that syrup adds a lot of sweetness to your mixture. But the main reason is that if you wash them and dry them, it means that your cherries won't, or hopefully won't, sink to the bottom of your scone. If you leave them in that syrup, they tend to drop to the bottom of your mixture. So if you were making a Christmas cake, for example, you would probably find that all your cherries just dropped to the bottom and they were all on the bottom. Whereas if you wash and dry them, they should, in theory, according to Delia Smith, stay suspended within your mixture. So I'm just going to scatter those in and just give those a little mix through. You can put more or less cherries into your scones. Just, if you like them absolutely packed with cherries, you can put more in. I tend to just like, the odd one or two sort of thing. So that's that. And now so that's all our dry ingredients. So now we need the wet. So we've got our milk here. This is, like I said, it's 6 fluid ounces, which is about 160 mils, and it's warm. Now what I do, I don't know whether this is a common thing, but I found it once in a recipe, and I tend to do it all the time now, and it does make a difference, is I put a squeeze of lemon juice. You can use orange juice, but make sure it's fresh. Just put a squeeze into your milk. Now what that does, I don't know if you can see, straight away, it causes it to curdle. Can you see that? And I think it kind of makes it into a sort of buttermilk substitute, or yogurt, something along those lines. But by doing that, it really makes a difference to the texture of your scone. It makes it lighter in a way and fluffier. I'm sure it's some sort of chemical reaction that's going on, because these things normally are. So what we'll do now, and it smells lovely, that lemon, is I'm going to pour my milk into the flour. Now, I don't normally put all of it in. Quite often we'll need all of it, but depending on, the temperature of the day, if it's humid in your kitchen, all these things make a difference to your baking. So I tend to put in almost all of it, and then if I think I need the rest of it, I can pop it in, whereas you can't take it back out again if you put it all in. And I always use a knife to mix. I've just always done this. It's just something my mum always did, and I just copy her, and it does make it easier to bring together. Now you can see it is still a bit dry down here, so I am going to put a bit more in. You want a mixture that's nice and soft, but that comes together really easily. That looks about right now. It will be quite sticky, but that's as it should be. Okay, so as soon as it comes together, kind of stop mixing. Okay, and now we want to just pop down a little bit of flour onto your work surface or your board or whatever it is you are using. Okay. And then get your mixture out. Now I just tend to sort of roll it in the flour just to make it a little bit easier to handle. Now this is where you would normally, if you want to use a rolling pin, you can roll it out at this point. I don't tend to think it needs it. All I do is flatten it down, and you want to handle this as little as possible, okay? Because the more you work it, the less light your scone will end up being. So I tend to just pat it out, and you want it probably about 3/4 of an inch thick, but no thinner than that, because you want your scone to really rise up and be lovely and fluffy and tall. So I'm going to use like a medium-sized cutter. I suppose that's about 2 inches, I think, looking at that. I'd say maybe 2.5 inches, that one. But use whatever size cutter you want. If you use a smaller one, then your cooking time will just be a little bit less, you know, because your scones are smaller. So I usually just dab it in the flour, go right to the very edge of your of your dough, and just cut straight down. Don't twist, because if you twist, that will stop it rising straight up. It will rise unevenly. So if you just go straight down, you're more likely, this is all a theory again, you're more likely to get a scone that rises straight up. And then onto your baking tray. So we just carry on cutting these out, and I'll tell you how many we're going to get in a minute, because I forget how many this mixture makes. Okay, now I've got how many there? 3, 6, 7, 8. And what I'll do now is you just gather your mixture back together, your dough, sorry, I keep saying mixture, don't I? Re-roll it, or just squish it, again being as gentle as you can, and then just go again, because we don't want to waste any of this lovely mixture. I do find the ones that I roll out with my second rolling can sometimes rise a bit more unevenly. Okay, so the last thing we do before they go into the oven, I just give them a little sprinkle with flour. Now, some people would just give these a brush with beaten egg, which you can do. I prefer just sprinkling a bit of flour on top. If you brush them with egg, it gives a very brown and shiny top, which is very nice, and if you prefer that, that's fine. But I prefer this more kind of natural, you know, home sort of made look, rather than the glossy look, if you like. But that's just my preference. So if you prefer to put beaten egg on top, that's entirely up to you. So all we do now is we pop them into the oven. It's quite a hot oven, 200 degrees C. I'm not sure what that converts to in Fahrenheit, but I'm sure you'll be able to convert that if you use Fahrenheit. For about 10 to 12 minutes, not very long at all. Keep an eye on them. Don't walk away, and do something and forget about them, because they will burn quite quickly. So about 10 to 12 minutes, but just, keep an eye on them. And they're done when they've risen up really lovely, and these ones will just be lightly brown on top. So I'm going to pop them in the oven now, and I'll see you back when we take them out. So we're going to make a cup of tea, or I should say a pot of tea. And I'm going to show you how I would make a pot of tea. This seems ridiculous that I'm doing this, but actually, if a lot of people these days don't make pots of tea, they'll make a quick cup of tea, and I've never experienced what it's like to have it in a pot. So I'm going to show you what I would do to make a proper, as far as I'm concerned, a proper English pot of English breakfast tea it will be. So what I've done first of all is I've warmed my pot. Now to do this I would normally, or quite often, I would just rinse it around with the boiling water that's just boiled, but I actually filled it just from the hot tap, because our taps, the water's really hot. So my pot is warm. I'm going to pop in 2 tea bags. Again, you know, for a proper pot of tea, I would prefer to use loose leaf, but I don't have any at the moment. If I was using loose leaf, I would put in a teaspoonful for each person that was going to have a cup of tea. So, for example, there's 2 of us, I would put in 1 spoon, 2 spoons, and then 1 for the pot, because that's just what my mum always used to do. But in this case, it's just for me, this. So I'm going to put in 2 lovely tea bags. Kettle has just boiled. Now it has been off the boil for a minute. Normally I would whip that straight in. It should be, you know, straight hot water straight off the boil. Pop that into your teapot. Lid on, and I would normally put a cosy on. I have got a cosy underneath there, so I would put a tea cosy on, leave that to brew for about 4 minutes, I would say. I wouldn't go any lower than that and any more than that. I would drink it if it was 5 or 6 minutes quite happily, or even longer, because I do like strong tea. But about 4 minutes I would brew it for. Okay, so shall we see if they're ready? I think they've had about 14 minutes, these ones, and they look about done, so. Ooh, lovely. I have just got those 2 halves still in the oven because they were on the lower shelf, so they just need another minute. But here we go. So the way they should be, these are hot, but I've obviously got asbestos fingers. They should be nice and golden on the bottom like that. I need to put them down because they're hot. So just put them onto a cooling tray and let them cool, you know, give them 10 or 15 minutes maybe. I think it's quite nice to have them with just, I would call it aired. I don't know if that makes sense to anybody, but still with a hint of the oven on them, if that makes any sense. So we will let those cool for a few minutes. Did you enjoy that? I hope you did, and I hope you're all going to make them. So what I thought would just do now is just try one. And you saw me pour the cup of tea, and you saw how I made it to the point of getting it in the pot. So there's different theories on whether you should put your milk in first or your tea. I always pour the tea first and then add milk. The reason I do that is because I can see the colour of the tea, and then I add the milk and I know when it's exactly the right colour that I like my tea. So I always put just a little bit of sugar in. I don't have a lot. I just have a sort of half a teaspoon really, just a little bit. And then I like tea quite strong, so let's see if the colour's about right. That's about right for me. I do like it, you know, builder's tea as we would call it in this country. But, you know, quite a strong cup of tea. That looks absolutely perfect to me. Just give the sugar a stir. I've got an eclectic mix of china this morning. This, I wanted to just show you this. This is the sugar pot and milk jug. I've actually got a full set of dishes in this. I've got plates, I've got side plates, I've got serving dishes, I've got a meat platter, teapot, and I've got teacups and all the tea, you know, the tea set to go with it. And I bought this set, it must have been about 1995, I think. And you can't get this range anymore. It's made by Noritake, and the range is called Tranquil Glen. I did think about selling this at one point, this china, because I kind of, you know how things go in phases, don't they? And I'd used it for years and kind of wanted something new. And I know it sells really well in America, but in this country, you know, you can sell it, but there's not as much of a market. And so I decided to keep it. So I packed it all away, and most of it is up in the loft. So I've still got the whole set, but I do keep these little pieces down because I do like using them. And then the other china that I've got, Dan bought me this for Christmas, how many years ago? A few years ago. And this is Wedgwood china. And it is, if I tell you the range, it's the Signet Platinum. And it's just plain white with this silver band. And again, you bought me, I think, 6 plates and a tea set as well, and side plates. And then the teapot is very eclectic, this mix. So that's the 90s, this was the 2000s, and this I think is 1960s or 70s I think. And I stole this off my mum. So I think she got it from a jumble sale, and I pinched it off her because it's a really good pourer. It pours really well. What I would do, I never cut a scone, I just break it open, and you know, it should break open like that. Now these ones are cherry scones, so I would only really put butter on. I wouldn't put jam and cream, I don't think, on these. I would just have some nice butter, so that's what we're having. So should we try them? I'm going to get that bit with cherry in. And I look forward to the next one. But like I said, in the meantime, please come and show our Facebook, in the Facebook group, show us the pictures of your little lovely English tea set all set up with your scones. And I will see you again next time.